Christina, if there was one message you'd like people to take away from this episode, what might it be?
I think it's that we all think that there's a type of person that gets to be doing the talking and sharing their ideas, and there isn't. Like, there's actually heaps more paths to influence other people with your ideas and be heard that are valid and valuable as well.
Now, you're the author of a book called Better. I love the cover. And before we get into the book itself, perhaps you could share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Sure. So I think I always, when you have to fill out a form with occupation, I always put that I'm a writer, first and foremost. I'm a writer, a reader, a learner, a thinker. I founded a company called Intelligent Inc. A number of years ago, 13 years ago, and we got kind of morphed from content agency via PR and publicity to we help purpose-driven people to have more impact with their ideas, so build thought leadership.
Hey there, if you'd like to support this show and help us continue producing this kind of content, please visit startwithvalues.com. There's a link in the show notes, and pre-order my forthcoming book. It's packed full of tools, insights, techniques to help you live a values-aligned life, to reduce stress, increase fulfillment, and it makes a great gift. So perhaps it's something you could share with someone else who you care about. That would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you again, and all the best. Let's get back to the episode.
And thought leadership is really just a vehicle to have a greater impact with your ideas than your kind of capacity in your calendar allows. So you will be doing amazing work with the people that you work with and those in your network or your clients or whatever. This is about thought leadership is really just a way of outsizing that the influence or the improvement that you can make because you allow more people to access the ideas or the methods or whatever that you're working with.
Okay, excellent. And what about your book, Better? It's a kind of guide for reluctant thought leaders. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm a reluctant thought leader, but also every thought leader that I work with has some form of reluctance. Even the ones that are successfully doing this and have what I would describe as a mature and fully leveraged thought leadership business, they still feel reluctance about certain activities or just often even owning the label thought leader as well. That's uncomfortable for lots of them. I spend a lot of my time coaching and encouraging those people, and they are all doing incredible things. And then I talk to so many more who are clever, generous, people having a really big impact in their work, and they won't put themselves any further because of a range of things that are holding them back. But a large part of it is seeing that kind of archetype, I think, of, I call them the sage on the stage, the archetype of what a successful thought leader looks like to their mind. And they think, that's not me, or I don't want to do all of that. So they stay small and they stay quiet. And we all miss out when that happens.
There must be so many great ideas that have never been brought to life because someone lacked confidence or just felt that they had imposter syndrome or something similar.
Exactly. And I think it's too important not to. Like, my soapbox kind of thing, I guess, is the world is not getting better or easier to navigate, or the problems are not getting smaller. So we actually need the best of we need the greatest number of great ideas, or on their way to great ideas, that we can get access to. So,
hey there, Brad here, and this is not an ad. This is me saying thank you for connecting with this podcast. I would like to offer you a free gift. If you visit bradleyhook.com/gift, you'll find something very special there just for you. Now back to the episode.
If people are staying small and staying quiet, then we all lose out. I talk about this sort of, there's this analogy, it wasn't mine originally, an analogy of the brain as a magpie, which is quite different to the brain as muscle or brain as computer metaphors. And the brain as a magpie suggests that, what we do when we think is we flit around and we go and collect all the best materials that we can find to kind of furnish into our nest or our ideas or our solutions. We are building with lots of different things, whatever we can get our hands or our beaks or our brains on, right? So to me, there's this space, I call it the collective ideascape, where all the conversations and that are fueled by thought leadership or the ideas that are being shared all reside. To me, the greater the quality of stuff that's in there, the better hope we've got of finding good solutions, creating like inclusive solutions that suit, the most people, and just making things better. That's why the book's called Better.
I like it.
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits for a thought leader or an aspiring thought leader to actually distill their big idea into a book?
Into a book. There is nothing that rivals having to write a book, well, not having to write a book, but, choosing to write a book. Some of them have to. In terms of evolving and maturing your ideas. So when you wrestle with them over 70,000 or so words, you've got to have something fairly robust to say. We've all read, though, the odd book that could have been a blog post or whatever. But, to write a good book, you have worked with that thinking for a long time. And you have refined and argued with it and challenged it and removed anything that wasn't adding to the case you're making. There's that. So it's a fast track to evolving your thinking. And I say fast track loosely because it's not fast either if you do it well. But it's also, you seed so many conversations along the way. You test out little bits of your ideas. You evolve what you're doing. It then feeds. I think there's a virtuous cycle that happens when people are doing the work in the thing that they're writing about as well, because something will spark in their writing. They'll take that into, a client session or a bit of delivery or an engagement conversation.
Hey, Brad here. Would you believe that around 70% of the people who watch this podcast have not yet subscribed? It would mean the world to us if you click that subscribe button on whichever platform you use so that we can stay connected with you and you'll receive notifications when we add new episodes. We really appreciate you coming and connecting with us and being part of our community. So all the best.
And then, there's feedback happening there. There's experimenting happening there. That all goes back to the book as well. So there's a personal development journey and there's also, to me, a professional development journey when thought leaders write their books. From another impact point of view too, though, books are still special. And I know I'm biased, but they hold a kind of special sacredness, which I think they deserve because it's not easy to write a book. So therefore, people who do it are already sort of respected for the fact they've managed to do it and finish it and get something out into the world. But we as readers engage with them in a particular way that's quite unlike how we consume most other content. I don't know about you, but I've got about 30 tabs open on my computer right now. There's a lot of, for me to read something on screen, there's a lot calling from a distraction point of view. Whereas I will read a book with, okay, not completely undivided attention, but much more focus and immersion than I could get in all these other formats. So people are giving you more of their undivided attention than.
How do you help an introvert or someone who doesn't believe their idea is valuable enough to tell their story? What are some of the steps?
I try and get them to, I talk about sort of the right-sized confidence a bit, because humility is an admirable trait, but it can be overplayed. And so to kind of right-size to help them practically right-size, we talk quite a lot about where they're seeing benefit, what sort of results they're getting from what they're doing already. When they talk about this stuff, what feedback do they get? They need to focus on how they help to make something better. That's the purpose-driven bit. Like they're succeeding in that space. There's a lot of imposter syndrome around, I don't have this title or this credential, or am I qualified to talk about this? And actually, if you can look at the evidence of real impact, that helps. I think also knowing that everybody has that critical inner voice, even the ones that have made it, are still listening to that voice that gets shouty at times, particularly when we're really close to the edge of our comfort zone or we're on the cusp of something important that matters to us. That inner voice gets really yelly. And so I think kind of accepting it. I did some work with another author who wrote a book about inner critic, and she talks about the fact that it's really hard to constructively deal with something you see as the enemy. So, accept it, welcome it in, but kind of take the control back. So I think that's one, knowing that it's universal and not a sign that you're on the wrong track or you're stepping out of your lane or anything like that. And then I think the final bit, you specifically said, Brad, about introverts. How do I help introverts to do this? We've got to dismantle the idea that, the loud and bold and confident people that can own a stage are the only ones worth listening to. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being that way, and some of my favorite people are that. We have to either help them understand that sometimes they need to just leave some space, or we have to find ways to value probably our currently undervalued traits as introverts, or quiet, considered, sometimes slower thinkers. Like, there are people that process information really quickly and can just see the way forward. And then there are people that bring in so many more, and actually introverts, research has found that introverts will consider more kind of thinking inputs. We will process more deeply than extroverts do. We notice more stuff. We're a bit more attuned to certain things. So we have really rich insights, but you need to wait for them sometimes. You need to wait for them, and you need to give us space to share them, because we're unlikely to just insert ourselves somewhere that's really noisy already. And I'm not actually, I'm kind of in the middle of the introvert extrovert. I keep saying we and I, but it's not just introverts, extroverts. It's processing styles, and it's I think just how much space you like to take up sometimes.
It is interesting. I sometimes find just through practice and repetition, I can stand up on a stage and deliver a seminar or workshop. The bigger the crowd, the more fun it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then have major social anxiety mingling afterwards. It's a really strange thing, like one-on-one versus one-to-many. Humans are complex. It's very interesting.
And you had a job to do when you're on stage with the microphone. I've been known to take, a camera to parties as though it was my job to, felt better to have the job of just catching some shots of the thing, because there was some purpose in that. Made me feel less awkward. Even though I was doing something that was probably quite awkward. We've got a lot working against us, as there's a dominant archetype for a reason, and they are successful for many good reasons, but also all the kind of cultural we live in. Susan Cain talks about the extroverted ideal. So we see leaders as being a certain way. We believe displays of confidence. We're less likely to question the competence of that person if they come across as confident. There are all sorts of, cognitive biases, cultural forces, and then just, I don't know, a lot of core stories and conditioning in all of us. And so when I started writing the book, I felt idealistic and it felt like maybe wishful thinking. But one of the things I really wanted to do was show people that those traits that they might be undervaluing, I want to show the quiet people and the loud people the traits that are currently being undervalued are actually superpowers when it comes to having better conversations and getting better stuff out there in that ideascape, and better solutions and better outcomes.
What about influence in our modern time? Influence has changed over the years. What are your thoughts about the current state of influence?
I think they're very closely tied up with this thing. That a lot of the reluctance comes from, I think I used the term on the back of the book, something about influence without the ick, because for some people the idea of having an influence feels a bit yucky. And there's as I was doing the thinking for the book, it's funny, it doesn't feature in the book, but I came up with these 4. The reluctance I see comes from everyone, but it could loosely be grouped into 4 types. And one of them is, there's the overthinking. I'm never finished. I can't put this out there because I've got to wait for the final piece to click, or I just need to read more or know more. There's shyness and just generally, but there's also this, and I'm nothing special, so anyone could have done that in that same situation. But there's this kind of servant feeling about lots of what we're doing, and those people that in that 4th kind of category, to me, they're the ones that are often engaging in thought leadership activities or behaviours, but then they're limiting themselves, unlike the others who may just not be doing anything to share their ideas because of those forms of reluctance. These ones are, but they're limiting and keeping it small because they equate influence with manipulation or exploitation, leveraging their networks or their relationships that they've built with, mutual value and all sorts of things over a long time. They see that as, I wouldn't want to exploit those for my gain. And so the sort of reframe that I have to offer in that sense is, but think of those people have this audience that have this problem that how to solve. So actually it's for their gain. Like, you're allowed to get a benefit from that too. I think we need to connect influence with purpose a bit more. And there's a genuine generosity when that happens. But it does have ickiness to people, and people, especially in New Zealand. I think our tall poppy syndrome. Also, we don't like to stick our necks out or our head too far above the parapet because everyone around us might chop it off. So, or they'll at least, boo us. throw something rotten in our direction. So yeah, I think if you can find the sweet spot in that, actually the value I'm giving to others, and that's valid and worthwhile and needed, I think you're here to serve others, and it's okay that there's benefits in doing so for you ultimately.
I also sometimes think if someone from my network came to me and said, hey, I've written this book, I celebrate that. I go, this is incredible. How can I buy a copy? And that's likely how people will respond to you, because it is an amazing thing to have done. And of course, there are going to be naysayers or people who say, roll their eyes, you know, you've written a book, ha ha, or whatever.
Everyone has.
Who cares? Yeah.
I was at a networking, an informal sort of meetup on Wednesday morning, and the woman who'd invited me along said at the end of the thing, how many people did you say that you've just written a book to? How many people did you tell about your book? And I said 0. I told 0 people. And I said, well, I heard you telling one when you introduced me, and so-and-so that I'd met at dinner, you know, a few weeks ago, she filled that in for someone else. And then, you know, the third person that was new to me that day that would know that information actually worked out that she'd just bought it because someone else had recommended it to her, even though she didn't know who I was yet. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and it's self-promotional, and it's whether we've done a thing or whether we've just had a thought about something. It's hard to blow our own horns.
But it is a gift to the world, and I think, why wouldn't you crystallize your thoughts at a point in time based on your experience and your research and what you've learned into something that you can share with others? Absolutely. But not only that, from my perspective, you know, writing my latest book, I have created a new version of myself. I've become an expert in the area of core values, which is something I was always interested in. But now I really can have a conversation. You can take me in any direction about core values. And I love it. And I'm fascinated by this, but I wouldn't have got to that level without spending the time writing a book about it. And now I can even run a values workshop, which is fantastic.
Personal and professional development that you've gone through in doing so. I think that's exactly right. You can't put out your best representation of your ideas, which is what a book to me should be. The best representation of your ideas at that point in time, you can't do that. It is a piece of you that you are putting out there. You can't do that process and be unchanged by it. It's big, but it's also, there is we write to think as well. We think to write, but we also write to think.
Definitely.
And someone said about one of the concepts, I workshopped 4 points in here in the book with a group on Saturday at their conference, and someone came up to me afterwards. He was so excited, and he said, "Can I bottle you?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, but why?" And he said he's a trainer in the corporate space, and he said, "What you just said about complexity and simplicity and not oversimplifying and stuff," he said, "I've been trying to get corporate people to get that for 20 years." And he's like, and I've brought in other people and I've talked to, and he said, nobody has put it as spot on as you just did. And I said, they were actually an organisation of professional speakers. It was the Professional Speakers Association of New Zealand. And I said, well, that is not because I'm a good speaker. Like, I didn't articulate it well to you in my, presentation or whatever because I speak well. I said, it's only because I've just spent like 16 months or something wrestling with it and writing it down. That's what gave that level of clarity. It wasn't that I stood up here and delivered gems. nerve-wracking audience, by the way, for a non-professional speaker
I
who would like to be a
imagine.
wallflower to speak in a room full of professional speakers.
Yeah.
But you got to practice what you preach, right?
You got to. No, it definitely helps. I find myself quoting passages from my own book in workshops, and it's great because I know it works because I spend so much time thinking about exactly how to phrase that.
You've
Yeah,
it.
exactly. It's amazing, and you learn it. I mean, you basically, I can recite paragraphs from the book pretty much word for word, just because of the editing process being so difficult. But another question I've got for you is, how important is authenticity as a thought leader and in the work that you do?
I would say vital, and it's for, and we think, well, authenticity is important because people are savvy. They can feel and tell when you're not actually showing up as you, and that turns them off. But actually, there's a really practical, more internal reason why authenticity is vital for thought leadership as well. There's definitely all of that. What you'd assume, why it's important, in the same way it is in comms and in relationships and whatever. All those reasons. But from a thought leadership point of view, thought leadership's a slow burn. It's not something you do quickly. And so you need to be able to sustain what you're doing from a thought leadership point of view. And that requires energy management. And so if you are being inauthentic, or if you are showing up in spaces that my speaking on Saturday is a prime example, okay? I put so much time and effort, and it was all that was on my horizon line for a time leading up to it. I dreaded it. I was avoiding it. I didn't want to do it. I was helping a colleague that couldn't be there anymore, and had to stand in. And it was incredible on the day, but the amount of nervous energy and things that came up, the sleeplessness, all the rest, it wasn't that there was nothing inauthentic about what I was doing, but I was so far from my natural, comfortable state. I think we should be a little way from our comfortable state. But the reality is I couldn't do that all the time. Like I love that I did it then and that I pushed, and God, the high afterwards, the feedback and but actually they're like, oh my goodness, I've done it. The relief, the sense of, honestly, pride that I went and did something that I definitely did not want to do. And what that then, tells me about me. The story that I get to tweak slightly about who I am as a result of doing that, absolutely worth it. But if that was my job every week or multiple times a week, that's not sustainable for me. The energetic toll that took was too high.
Yeah.
So I think I haven't quite answered your question, and I want to just circle back a tiny bit, which is, you said, why is authenticity important? It's so that you can stay the course, but I think there's a balance of comfort and challenge that you need. So you need to kind of be bumping up against the edge of that comfort zone and crossing over and out of it every once in a while, but you've got to balance that with the comfortable places that you can show up and that do sustain you as well.
Absolutely. Do you think it's true that unleashing a little bit of your weirdness or the real version of you is important?
Yes, absolutely. In all formats that we're communicating with other humans, realness matters. And, we hear the writing advice is often, with publishers and external editors and stuff that we've worked with, the cry is always put more of yourself in the story. Even if you're not writing a personal story, put more of yourself in the story. On stage, or when you're speaking, you want to be real and you. And I've had advice which I did adhere to, which was to not stand up there and apologize for being nervous. I did not, say how much I actually reframed it. I said, how amazing that I get to do my first ever keynote in front of a room full of professional speakers, which, but I didn't apologize for how I was, and or that I had to still have my pieces of paper to read. And I didn't point to my nerves or anything, but I don't know. I was real, and also I cracked a terrible joke, and like it, I relaxed as they all relaxed, because they were like, could see who I was up there.
Yes.
And so I think realness is really, we can feel it.
You can definitely feel when it's not there. That's for sure. You can tell when someone has deliberately constructed a facade that is almost impenetrable, and you're like, it almost feels a bit creepy when you're interacting with someone like that.
Too. Yeah. It's a performance, and it's where I think some of that ick comes from. I've watched there's a guy, I anonymize a story in the book about this conference that, and I don't even go into this is a side part of that story, but we were at a colleague and I were at an event, and this guy comes bounding out on stage, and I use him in the book to demonstrate the archetype, because he's like got his slicked back hair, and he's like dances onto the stage, and with this big rah-rah music. It wasn't Tony Robbins, but it was quite, high impact, like mega wattage, everything. And then he launches into his thing, and he is slick and smooth and polished and damn well rehearsed, and it's all just like these spiffy sound bites and stuff. And we got to the end of the session, and my colleague, who I do give a bit of a hard time to, that she's going to accidentally join a cult at some stage, but she's just sitting there, and she's like, wow, like, we need to find a way to like do this. We need to sign up to the thing and partner with him and all that. And I honestly was like, were we just in the same session? Because to me, the more slick and polished and the more of a show that you're putting on, the more my skepticism is like, yeah. I start looking more closely. I'm like, what are you trying to pull over here? So yeah, but totally different reactions to the same thing. And I think we know who our people are, and we vibe with the same energy that we have and that sort of thing, probably more. But yeah, she was just like, I am there, hook, line and sinker, like, give me all you've got. And I was like, wow, I didn't see it. I couldn't get it. So the showmanship can always win some people over. Not always the same people either, I'm not saying, even though, despite telling her she's going to join a cult accidentally. She's not gullible. She's not silly. She's not naive. None of those. So she'd probably look at something else and be like, no. But you're always going to win some people over with showmanship, but you can't reach. There are so many that you won't reach if you're putting on a show. That you can.
It's like Tony Robbins is not for everyone, right? Some people love that, just the energy, and someone who's confident and who seems to know the way, like no doubt in his mind that he knows the way. Mm-hmm. Whereas for the more skeptical, it's kind of like, how do you know the way? What really? And people are going to pay this much money to go and, shout for a couple of days at an event. It's not, I mean, I think a measure of success is how many people don't like your content. That's one angle, because the more people who don't like it, well, hopefully you've got a matching number who do like what you do. Yes. If it's all bad, then it's probably time to rethink.
Absolutely.
finding your own way. And from personal experience, I think you can do a bit of both. You can have some well-polished jokes or some well-polished concepts and make it big and bold, but then bring it back down so that you're really authentic and connect with the personal story. Hey, I'm not perfect. This is, I really struggle in this area, and then leave them on a high note or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you can find ways. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
No, even some of the stories get a little polished over time, I've noticed. Like, when I now try and retell in speaking to someone, when I try and retell stories that I've written in the book, like I've edited those an awful lot of times. And that is a level of polished. Do I always say it exactly the same way? No, I haven't memorized the thing, but I know how to tell that story. And I can imagine as I lean into more speaking potentially, or, just sharing more of the content of this thing that I've worked on, I will tell that story more and more, and it will become more practiced. So I have to still keep that real, and try to do so.
Could an influencer, we live in the age of influencers, and many of them, their first stop is to try and build a large social media following. Could they benefit from the tools in your book to maybe find their why and discover their purpose? Because a lot of it, I've heard of so many influencers just burning out because they can no longer produce content at the pace or the volume that they used to. And I mean, your book, it's a more authentic path for the reluctant thought leader, but I'm pretty sure that some of these concepts cross over to the quite reluctant, someone who just wants to be famous. What do you think?
Yeah. I would say so. It's interesting what you said about burning out then, because I think sometimes that, and I don't know the answer to this, so it's dangerous to just put this here.
For sure.
But I think sometimes the most purpose-driven are the most at risk of burning out, because they can't put down the thing because it's important and it's meaningful and they're connected to it. And if I don't do it, who's going to do it? What I guess I'm advocating for is a different way of showing up to be okay. And in trying to kind of dismantle you don't need to be this way, I know I have to supply it, because look at how great this way is. And in doing that is why I'm trying to show those traits as superpower. I knew that some of the bold, loud, good at spiffy sound bites people in my life would read this book. I'm married to one at home, and I'm also married to one at work. And so I knew that I needed to, it was actually them in mind when I wanted to talk about how some people are without ever being offensive to that, because there's nothing wrong with being that way. But what I'm trying to show, and what I've seen people now get, whether they are the quiet or the loud ones, is these sort of different ways of showing up and leaning into traits that we've all got, but the quiet ones have known that they're like that to the point, this isn't making sense, but to the point of thinking that makes them unsuitable for this work. Whereas I'm saying, no, be that. That's cool. I'll explain what I mean, hopefully better, by telling you what they are. So I call them the 4 qualities of better in the book. And they are what I think make for better thinking and better conversations and better impact and better outcomes and all those, everything better. Better communication, all of that. When I wrote about them, it was originally when I started thinking about them, it was to try and convince the people who saw those as grounds for not pursuing thought leadership. I wanted to show them that they were superpowers. But actually, the more I worked with the ideas, the more I realized that actually anyone could benefit from leaning into these a bit more. And we've all got them. They're not inherent only in the quiet ones. So the first one's about inviting and embracing complexity. So treating complex issues as though they actually are complex. I think we could all do with a bit of that, and the I guess pleased to be there influences too. You don't need to strip everything out. Like, bring us some nuance. There's not always only just two sides. We think we're doing well often if we consider two sides of an argument, but really there's way more than that.
Yeah.
And so, how do you kind of, we look in here at how you bring in more perspectives and lean into complexity, but then you still have to get what you're thinking back to something, from all that wide whatever to something workable. So, and, think about the format that you want to communicate across and get a mix of those as well. So that's kind of the complexity piece, is let's treat complex things as though they actually are complex, because we leave more room in them that way. And we're doing more justice to the things we're discussing if we do that. And then the next one is acknowledging uncertainty. So I think that we would all do well to be able to show what we are certain of and what we can stand kind of quite solidly in, and where the kind of edges of what we know to be true or know well actually are. So I reference scientists a bit. I talk about scientists or draw a parallel with them in the book, because when you see, a couple of reasons: A, the way they work, but B, too, when we see scientific studies or peer-reviewed academic work or whatever, it's very clearly stated, here's the scope of this research, and here's what you can safely assume from it, and here's what you shouldn't assume from it. These are some assumptions we've made. They're labelled as assumptions. But in our less formal communications, there's none of those frames or disclaimers at all. So we're presenting things that we're maybe still figuring out as though they're facts, or as though they're things that we know. So be okay to not know everything. That's a way of helping those overthinking, reluctant thought leaders, but actually we could all do with a bit more humility around our ideas. Acknowledge where you're not sure. And that kind of leads on to the third one, which is leave some space for others. So share what you're thinking in a collaborative and inclusive way. And we do that by admitting we don't know everything. We can ask questions, or we can just leave I'm wondering about this, or I know this, but what about this ramification or this application or whatever? Who's seen this show up in their work, or any of that inquiring stuff is inviting for other people. So we think better with others, so therefore let them in. It's not a one-way women broadcast channel. So share in a way that invites other perspectives and other contribution. And then the final one is allow your thinking to evolve. So by that I mean, we all know that we are learning all the time and we're getting new ideas, but it's a little bit like watching a child grow, right? You're not seeing it in front of your eyes. It's only when they go try on last season's shorts and they're stubby that you can tell that they've grown. The same thing happens with our expertise, especially in the areas that we're working in. So allow your thinking to evolve, but I add the loudly and proudly to that. So own the evolution and show the evolution as well. People commonly, they'll cringe when someone says, I checked out your website, and they know they haven't updated the content for a while. Or we'll look at a video of us speaking or presenting or something from 5 years ago, and as well as maybe laughing at your haircut or thinking about how many less wrinkles you have or whatever. It's really common to be like, oh, what on earth, about what you were saying in that video too. because we try to, we know new stuff and we want to appear that we've always known all that new stuff. We were never unsure, and we never had a less mature or evolved view of that. But actually we build trust when we can show the journey that we've been on and the way that our thinking's evolved. I use an example of the book Effortless by Greg McKeown. He says it's his second book that follows essentialism, and in his introduction to Effortless, there's a section called The Dilemma, is the subheading, and he basically dismantles or points out the limitation of his essentialism thinking. He was doing all the things to be the perfect essentialist, and it still wasn't working. And that's how he sets up what effortless is. He was doing the right things, but he was doing them in the wrong way. So essentialism was about doing the right things. Effortless is about doing them now in the right way. And I read essentialism and loved essentialism. And when I got to this bit, did I go, oh, well, you're dead to me now. Like, what an idiot. Why would I read your second book if you hadn't nailed it in your first book? No. If anything, I trusted him more. And I was kind of like, whoa, look at the journey we're going to go on together. I was right there with him because he'd shown me that he'd fronted up to go, here's the shortcomings in that, and here's what I know now. Let me share that with you. And I was excited to hear that. So personally, I put more stock in what someone's saying if they've demonstrated that their kind of reflection and learning loops are robust. And that's what we do if we can point to, when we didn't know that thing, or, how I used to think this and now I can see that. And isn't that cool? Like, what else could we still learn about this?
I love the way you've talked us through that. And for those out there who would like to deep dive, I have the page here. Oh, will it be in focus? There we go. Chapter 6. And it really unpacks that concept, gaps in our knowledge. So, actually, it's all through the book, but the diagram is all through. Yeah. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Christina. If people would like to connect with you, if there are reluctant thought leaders out there who would like your support in helping them tell their story, or if people would like to purchase your book, where would you like them to go?
Well, they can definitely connect on LinkedIn. That's a good place, and there's links to the book and stuff there. You can get the book places like Mighty Ape. It's on Amazon as a Kindle and print version. And we've got a direct link through our website. There are books, lots of independent booksellers selling it, but online is still best. So, yeah.
Great. Those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, helping people tell their stories. I think it's really important and it's inspiring personally as well. Any final thoughts for those who stuck with us all the way to the end?
No, but thank you. And I hope something resonated, like whether it was the permission that you don't need, but, felt like you needed, or the encouragement. Go and share. It's an act of service. Honestly, generous and genuine thought leadership is an incredible contribution.
And on that note, we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.